Hello, and welcome to Season 10, Episode 14 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
We are, of course, reading the Thomas Sowell Reader, reading some of the best articles from The Economist, political commentator Thomas Sowell, this time starting the section on educational issues. This will be another two-part section. We go through half of the articles here this week and then half next week. I thought this was good for the most part. There were two articles in here that kind of dealt with the same topic that I think we'll get to a little bit later that I really disagreed with him on. The one about
Really?
the one about community service. I thought that was a really
You're
strange.
wrong.
Yeah, you think so? We'll talk about it when we get to the
Oh, yeah, we're
article.
going to get to
Okay,
that.
okay. Um,
Yeah, you are 100% wrong if you
all
disagree with
right.
him. Good, we have something to argue about.
Yes.
So the first one, can I take us in?
Yeah. Go ahead.
You
Yeah.
think you're the moderator, but I don't know that you
No,
are.
go
Anyway,
ahead.
so wait, let me make sure I look at the first one. Yes, educational issues. The first one is tragicomic educators, and educators, of course, in scare quotes. But what I love about it is he's talking about like uh, uh, educational theory and curriculum, and the average. And this was being written, I think, in the early 2000s. A few years ago, a study. This is him from this book. But a few years ago, a study showed the average verbal scholastic aptitude test score for aspiring teachers to be 389 out of a possible 800. And it's funny, and I guess I'm going to defame. I can defame educators. I'm an educator now,
That's
right?
right. Sure,
It's
I
kind
think
of
that's how that works. Yeah.
like Seinfeld episode where his buddy, they were arguing over whether he converted to Judaism for the jokes. And Jerry was all offended because as a comedian, not as a Jewish person. But then Kramer said he was a dentist, and Kramer says you're an anti-dentite. It was pretty funny episode. Anyway, so since I'm an educator, I think I can criticize education majors. But education majors, I mean, it's such an easy area of study
Hmm.
with very, what do you say, amorphous or kind of general standards. I mean, it's like the people that go into education, a lot of them, I'm not saying all of them because you have a brother who's brilliant who's going into education,
Hmm.
but he's coasting. I mean, he's
Yeah.
straight A, completely coasting.
Yeah.
But what I mean by that is, he's doing all the work necessary to get basically perfect scores,
Hmm.
and he's not breaking a sweat
Yeah.
because the curriculum's so easy
Hmm.
until they get to like student teaching, which is where they're actually out there trying to teach students. There's nothing good about any of it. It
Yeah.
seems like to me, and that's what his point is. And there's always these fads, and I don't know if do you remember? Well, you were not born yet, but in the year 2000 to 2004, I was on a school board. Did you know
Hmm.
that?
I knew that.
I was
Yeah.
I was appointed and then elected. Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
You've
yeah,
told me that. Yeah.
and and I remember one of the school board members was he was an engineer, so of course he's fixated on stuff, but he really wanted to review the curriculum, and and I didn't know that I had any interest in it. I was only 30 at the time, so I was really young, too young to be in elected office for me. I mean, other people can do it, but I was immature, and I didn't realize when you disagree with pithy comments,
Hmm.
people stop liking you.
That's insane. I don't know how you could be expected to know that. That's yeah.
Uh, yeah. So anyway, especially if it's in public,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I think I have a decent sense of humor. Opinions vary.
Hmm.
Evidently. But anyway, this guy John, a great guy, and he was pushing. Hey, we got to read the curriculum. We wanted these kids to do better. We wanted standards higher. Blah blah blah. And I remember distinctly the superintendent just pushing him off, pushing him off, pushing
Hmm.
him off, because the last thing they wanted was oversight over the curriculum. And your grandmother, my mom was a teacher, my sister's a teacher, your mother was an elementary school teacher, and now I'm something of an educator, I guess. But it's like they always have continuing education stuff, which is, oh, here's a new theory on how to teach math
Hmm.
to second graders. Like, wait a second, do you really need a new theory? I mean, what is it that's so much different with this new fad to teach, basic math. And it's not just like around the edges, like, well, this is
Yeah.
making it a little more interesting or something. It was like completely trying to revamp the curriculum as if, the people that have been educating our students effectively for decades didn't do a good job.
Hmm.
Might not be the most fascinating in the world, but at least it got the job done better than what we're doing now. And then, of course, a lot of what he talks about, I think in this one, I know he does in the second one, where they're trying to teach to what they want as like an emotional response or what they
Right.
care about. Like, you know what, you're teaching math. Why are you even talking about gender? I
Hmm.
mean, why do you have a pride flag in a geography? And granted, it's a flag, but there is no gay state. All right, that's a political statement. It's not like the country of Gaydistan or something. So why is there a pride flag
Right.
in your room?
Right. I know one
Because
of the things, yeah, he points out is like the real like aggressive, pushback against like rote learning and memorization and stuff like that. And then that's something I've seen, a lot. I didn't take education classes necessarily, but I, I'm in fields that are very much directed towards jobs in education or academia. So I've lots of like discussions on, how to teach these topics and stuff like that with classics and linguistics. Now, well, I did take um, I forget the name of the class. It was like second language education course for my linguistics major, which was kind of just a gimme class in undergrad. But a lot of the classes were kind of easy anyway. But I know that was one of the things is that there's this big push of, well, you shouldn't have so much, rote memorization type stuff in language classes because, it is more effective if you're just actively using the language. And yeah, yeah, to an extent that's true. The more you use the language in a natural setting, the easier it is to learn, and sort of that natural environment rather than just looking at, charts and tables of how to conjugate verbs and stuff. But if you push back too much against it and say, well, no, everything should just be kind of natural, then you're going to push out a bunch of students who don't know how to conjugate the verbs, right? It's like there is just a certain level of memorization that just needs to happen. And focusing on, the argument, well, students get bored and they lose interest and maybe they won't like the topic anymore after a while. It's like, well, okay, sure. But, actually learning the topic is much more important than having the kids just be entertained 24/7, right? It's not, a daycare. It's a class. It's school is what it is.
yeah, the basic is that they have to learn it.
Yeah.
If you could do it in a more entertaining manner and you can verify that, you knock yourself out. I think it's great. But the core mission is still that they retain the knowledge in some fashion and
Hmm.
just and diverting into other areas, which is easier. It's
Right.
something you care about. Well, I regret to inform you, my real estate law class has been canceled this semester
Oh,
because we don't
no.
have enough people, which is actually fine. I'm teaching a topics in law, criminal law, which is
Hmm.
I have to build that up from scratch for the summer, so I'm going to do that. I was going to do it anyway, but I was kind of like, I don't want to go like 8 weeks and then 8 weeks directly into the next one. So I was not upset anyway. But they tried to get me to teach other classes
Hmm.
in lieu of the one that they're gonna have to cancel. And I think at first it seemed like they were trying to placate me or whatever, which is nice. I guess I don't know how they have an idea that I'm a good teacher, but my dean has this impression that I'm a great teacher. I could be. I have no idea. They have no idea. In any event, so the first pitch was, to ask me. It was very nice to teach legal writing, and I can, but I have zero interest in it, and I don't really consider myself an expert in it. Although I guess I am because I've been a lawyer for forever.
Hmm.
And it turned out it was on a night that I have conflicts, and I told you I didn't want to do it anyway. And then the next one was intro to law. I said I would do that one, but I'm sorry, that's one that had the conflict, the intro to law, and then it was legal writing, and there was a third one. And so finally, I said, "Look, I'm going to give you a list of the things that I feel like I can do."
Hmm.
Uh, but like and of course I'm an adjunct, so you know, it's course specific, but that's in my field, and so it's my job to be interested in the subjects I'm teaching, or at least being proficient in educating people.
Hmm.
And I'm not going to inject like whatever I say in this podcast or my political views or whatever they are into what I'm supposed to be teaching. I mean, it's just never going to happen. Um, and every once in a while, I'll mention something a contract law because something might be topical. And my class was really interested in my example of duress, which was a short video from a documentary about Vanilla Ice,
Mm,
and he claims that Suge Knight held him, like took him out in the balcony and threatened to throw him off the balcony if he didn't sign over his royalty rights to Ice Ice Baby,
mm-hmm.
which evidently is true, but whatever. So that's an example of duress. But like what Soul, bring it back to the book, Soul's talking about is that like all these teachers, if you're an English teacher, they want to inject their personal political views into the curriculum because they're interested in it. Okay, well that's irrelevant.
Yeah.
Your happiness, your interests are irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
And as an instructor, if I'm going to be miserable, then I'm not going to do it. And then you're not going to pay me. You're going to get somebody else who will do a good job. And a lot of these educators don't understand that that's their responsibility to either have an interest or work on it so that you can do at least a proficient job.
Yeah. Yeah, true. Yeah, and I
Well,
think that ties into the next one with the scientists need not apply is the title.
yes.
And his message here is there's this curriculum that was designed by somebody who won the Nobel Prize. He wanted to go into California and say, well, here's a curriculum of all the things that students would need to learn, to be proficient in science. But of course, there's a lot of pushback against that because there's this idea that you need to have the right qualifications to be able to be an educator, to teach and things like that. And Soul's just pointing out, well, it's just ridiculous because what are the credentials of the people currently designing the curricula? Well, it's they got a degree in education and then a master's in education, maybe even a PhD in education. It's like, well, do those degrees even mean anything? And why would they have any higher value over someone who actually won the Nobel Prize and who wanted to design the science curriculum? They just did not want even his input at all. I was like, well, leave that to us, the more intelligent people somehow. And it's just that pride and that really closed off nature of a lot of the academic field, the education field. Where it's like it's up to us and us alone. But any failures on our parts can't be blamed on us. Those could be blamed on society, parents, anything else you want them to be. So it's like we're perfect and we're the only ones qualified to do so, to make these curricula. But if anything goes wrong, it's not our fault. It's everybody else's fault who we didn't let into this process in the first place.
Yes. Well, and I really like his quote. Uh, it kind of starts out as I was reading it, a little surprised when he started. He says, "Our public schools have not failed; they have succeeded incredibly in carrying out their own agenda, wholly at cross purposes with the goals of those who pay the bills and those who send their children to them to be educated." And
Hmm.
so the point here is the education establishment. When you're talking about, you're just referencing, they want to create the curriculum. Well, they're successful in the goals they set, but those aren't the goals that we want as a fundamental goal of our educational system.
Right.
He just does a really good job of explaining that in like it's really a 2-page column.
Hmm.
Uh, really, really pithy,
Yeah. No,
really
I agree.
effective.
I agree. Any other thoughts on that one?
No, I think the next one is super timely,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is higher education and low comedy. And this was early 2000s. He was ahead of his time, but I mean, this has been percolating. It might seem strange to you, but these issues have been percolating for 30 years through our educational system. It's just they seemed more bizarre
It was this
and
early
ridiculous.
2000s. There's a footnote that says 1993 in the article he's referencing.
Yes,
I don't know if this
yeah,
was
yeah,
earlier
yeah,
than that. Yeah.
right.
So
Yeah, in
it's
the 1990s. Yes,
1990s. Yeah.
correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So this has been going on for a long time, and what I'm talking about is it talks about uh, it was a Chronicles of Higher Education talking about a New York University advertised for a faculty member in the performing arts for what it called, quote, gendered performance. The specific duties of the job, and this is a job listing, job include drag, transvestite performance, queer theories. So, I mean, this has been, but it was so, like you read this article because he was a syndicated columnist and you think, oh my gosh, that is just so crazy that there's actually one college doing that. I mean, and that's the way we would think about it. It's like such an outlier,
Hmm.
but it was just the beginning. And it's just like they just seeped into every freaking college in the United States now.
Yeah.
We're what, 30 plus years later, it's almost unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, I like
Um,
the next sentences that right after you left off. He says the university
yeah,
quote encourages applications from women and members of minority groups end quote. None of the usual stuff about being an equal opportunity slash affirmative action employer that we've grown so used to that its internal contradictions no longer bother us. And I think that's even more prescient because now I'm used to the more extreme version where it's like, well, we want specifically
yes,
applicants from these communities, and you don't have the affirmative action. Maybe have that in a tiny blurb at the very end, of course, which contradicts the very premise of who they're hiring for, the equal opportunity and everything. But it's like that is the norm for a lot of these positions that I see out there. It's like, we want specifically within this department this type of person, and it's like that's
yeah.
insane. But yeah, you're right. It would have been much more shocking, I'm sure, 30 years ago.
Well, when he's so brilliant, and he knows at that time how the left is winning, and he doesn't predict it, but he shows us how it's going to keep getting worse and worse from this point that he's writing it till now. At the
Hmm.
very last sentence, he says, "Experienced academic administrators have also learned how to minimize the number of such episodes, which are like protests and student nonsense, by various techniques of preemptive surrender." And
Hmm.
that's really what they've been doing. These deans, it's funny, like the Animal House movie, which I don't know that you've seen, but the bad guy is a Dean Faber, or no, it's Faber College, isn't it? So it's, I forget the dean's name. Anyway, he's like the heavy in the movie, this comedy. But it's like we need more of those kind of deans
Hmm.
that will just kick people out of school,
Yeah.
rather than just, or but like, if I've talked about in this podcast before, even in my little tiny corner of the educational world, I know it's so much easier just to make accommodations to people because what's it to me? Why would I stand in the breach of somebody who has some extra around? Now I haven't gotten to the point where it's anything really inappropriate yet. I probably will. I'll probably, just be curmudgeonly and be obstinate, but I probably regret it, because there, there's no incentive,
Hmm.
to really have high standards and to fail people who aren't, shouldn't
Yeah.
advance to the next. Because if you
Yeah.
do that, then they'll squawk about it, and then they're gonna complain. And what's it to me if they get a C grade, as long as they don't complain, then I'll just pass them up to the next one. And I think
Yeah.
that's just a lot of what's going on. There has to be negative incentives so there isn't preemptive
Yeah.
surrender.
Yeah, I think his point about, the mob rule is what he calls it. I think is very, very
Yes.
true. Because I mean, he mentions the points about what was in UCLA when students attacked the faculty club. And of course, no one was really punished. They were actually rewarded by the administration by just giving in to all of their demands because they wanted a Chicano studies department and to exempt ethnic studies programs from any of the cutbacks that might hit such non-relevant subjects as mathematics or economics. And so I think it was Chris Rufo's book that talked a lot about that in the left wing initiatives in academia. That so many of those sorts of like ex studies departments were founded and started after literal mob violence on campuses. And it's
Yes.
like, I didn't realize that before I'd read the book and know the history of those programs. But that sort of like mob mentality, I think is still very much present. Luckily, I've never
Yeah.
been on campuses where where there's been massive protests and stuff like that. But there is still that mentality. It's like, you have to agree with everybody around you, or at the very least, if you don't, you're going to get lambasted on social media, if not reported, to administration. And it's like, yeah, you have to sort of agree with the collective idea here, or else you'll face very negative consequences, and not from administration, just from other students often.
True. True. Yep. And everybody's just trying to, like, yeah, I'm just here to get a degree.
Hmm.
I'm just here. I'm here for the tailgate party for Saturday.
Yeah.
What the hell? What's going on?
Hmm.
Why you why are you locking us out of class? Do I really want to fight through that mob to get into class? Because the professor canceled class. Oh, good, I got the afternoon off.
Yeah.
I mean, so that there's not that kind of motivated, the people that are motivated to cause chaos have a tremendous amount of power in a soft target like that. Because like I said, the dean has no interest in being confrontational with those people in the short term. in the long term, and if you care about your institution, you know, you're going to gather them together and you're going to expel them all.
Yeah.
Just kick them all out. Who
Yeah.
cares? Do you really want those knuckleheads in your university embarrassing everybody? And part of it, he mentions the media and how they describe them
Hmm.
as a protest.
Yeah.
No, that's a riot. That's property damage, and you should describe them as alleged criminals. Now you can say
Yeah.
alleged because they haven't been convicted yet, but when you have them on video, literally smashing windows,
Hmm.
holding people hostage in a building,
Yeah.
and then coming out, what was that one? Was it Harvard? It was out east. I forget which one it was, where they took over a building and then they complained because they wouldn't bring them lunch because they were on the meal plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
We
Because they go.
paid for the meal plan and they're not delivering the food. And what?
Yeah,
Golly.
it was framed as, yeah, I remember, I forget which campus it was at. I don't know if it was there, if it was Columbia College maybe, but they had
Maybe.
taken over one of the halls.
Yeah.
And then they framed it as though the campus was trying to starve them out and was like infringing on their right to protest. Because, well, you could just leave and get
Yeah.
food. You are not
Yeah.
stuck. You are the ones taking over this building. You can leave and get
And just
food.
go across the street to Subway, you dummy, or Chipotle or something. If I were the dean, well, number one, I'd want to have armed thugs. I want some violence upon them, visited upon them. But short of that, I would have done like the FBI agents in Die Hard. You shut off the power, you
Mm.
shut off the water, and you literally starve them. And then I'd block them in. And say this is an exhibit to the futility of protests on my campus. And then be banging, let us out! Let us out! No. You want in? It's like Hotel California. You can check in, you can never leave.
Oh, that's funny.
Guess what? We're giving you a PhD. PhD in protesting. You're gonna be here for the next 5 years. I expect your thesis to be double spaced. I don't know, whatever.
Oh my gosh. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They need to have consequences because
Yeah.
they're just play acting. Oh, and they're like, you're going to expel me, and then
Yeah.
like the foreign students, holy smokes,
Hmm.
they're smashing up windows and putting graffiti on stuff.
Yeah.
There's a new day coming,
Mhm.
and I don't know if they're prepared for
Yeah.
that
But
because
that's
student visas could be revoked and they should be
yeah.
out of the country.
Yeah.
You know,
But yeah. In the
that's a
next
huge
article,
problem. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. And then the next article, he talks about the very successful foreign students. So kind of on the other end of things, he says it's titled "Success Concealing Failure," and I guess this
Yes,
was written in 1999 because he's
in
describing,
2000
in
after the
2000, yeah, right.
99.
Nobel
Um,
Prize, yeah,
right.
awards, yeah, yeah. And so it's widely argued. Well, look how many of these prize recipients were from America. They're American citizens, and so they went through this great American education system and won all these Nobel prizes and all these different topics. And of course, what he points out is that very few of them. Were not from America. They were immigrants. Went through a different country's immigration system, and then or their
Education.
education system. Yeah, sorry. And then went into higher education here after they'd gone through whatever public system or private system, private school, whatever they went to in a different country was. And he says, well, you cannot praise the American education system as an example of success, right? It says something about maybe the advantage of some of our universities in their research, but not just in the teaching environment, especially in our public schools. Of course, he points out just how many people who receive PhDs in the U.S. are not from America or not born in America, and so the idea that it's just because of America's great education system is ridiculous in his opinion.
Yeah, and I think it's gotten a lot worse in the last 20 years since these articles in this book were published. I mean, it's they're able to mask their ineptitude to a certain degree, but you're seeing a lot of people, and I assume there are people in your high school class around there that's like, why are we going to college?
Hmm.
Like one of Sam's friends, I mentioned his name. I think he might be the most successful out of all of them, and he
Hmm.
did like a semester or two in. He's smart as can be. He absolutely could get straight A's in any college program he wanted to go into, but he's like, I just want to work. And
Yeah.
he and his brother formed, I think, like 3 or 4 businesses now, and they're doing great. He's working
Hmm.
like a dog, but he's loving it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's starting to dawn on people, especially the parents. And I think when your generation become parents, and we are just having a conversation with about your little brother. I mean, granted, we're kind of in a different situation because all of our boys are basically geniuses. So that's not to say you can't be in the trades if you're a genius, but maybe I think we want to encourage geniuses to go to into educate higher education and get advanced
Hmm.
degrees that are worth something.
Yeah.
Um, as a society.
Hmm.
But man, I got to tell you when Ed Muzzy, God rest his soul, poured our concrete pad out back, I was astounded at his ability to do complex math calculations with regard to the volume that
Yeah.
he needed of concrete. I mean, it was instantaneous, and I think it was like because there's multiple angles. I think it was trig. I mean,
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
and I had taken math. I mean, I'm not a dummy, although I haven't looked at I haven't really studied math in a long time. But I was shocked. I mean, the guy was so smart with regard to calculations in his head,
Hmm.
um, and popping out numbers, and then of course bid estimates and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not saying people that are in the trades are not super smart. So many of them are. I mean, you have to be really, really smart to be successful leading those kind of businesses. But in any event,
Yeah, well, that's one of
I
one
think
of
our
my
education.
most successful friends from my high school class right now. I mean, a lot of us are still in school and stuff like that, but is the guy who went into to Army Reserves and
Yeah,
then is now in an electrician's apprenticeship. And so
yes,
he went out to Kuwait, for a 9 month stint or whatever as part of his requirements and stuff like that. Got paid a whole bunch of money by the Army. Now working, full time as an electrician's apprentice, and he's going to have a great paying job, as soon as that's finished. And it's like, yeah, he's set up much better than any of the rest of us.
yep,
And, it's just I think a lot of people are starting to realize that. I think it's a
yep.
slow realization, but people are getting there.
Well, and Sol's point is that the higher education system has done a great job of masking their
Yeah,
ineptitude. And
yeah,
what is the point of it is of his article? I got to tell you, being an electrician is not for the faint of heart either. I mean, you
yeah.
really have to you know a lot.
Hmm.
It's not easy. I've done a little bit of electrical work at a house, and I was like, wait a second, how does this switch work again? It's a three-way switch, and and anyway, so that's I have a lot of respect for the trade.
Yeah. And then the next two articles are the ones that I kind of disagreed with them on, and they're both deal with the same topic. One's titled "Public Service or Disservice," and the other's "Forced to Volunteer." They're both on the topic of schools requiring students to do some form of community service as part of their graduation requirements. And then
Tell me why he's wrong. This is we're going to start a fight.
yeah, the reason I disagree with him is not because, I think it's inherently like a good thing for, students to be required to volunteer whatever, left-wing cause. Because I think that's his big problem with it is it's just some sort of environmental cause or social justice cause that these universities are forcing students to do. And I think that is true. Where I disagree with him, and I think it's kind of in a lot of these articles too, kind of under the surface, is his idea that the university is only for um, like grades, is only for strictly the subject material that you are required to cover to get your specific goal. And I think that's been a problem on the right for a long time because I think the left, in a weird way, understands the purpose of a university a little bit better than the right. Because the right has treated universities as just a more expensive trade school, I think, for a very long time. That should be just this and that's it. But the idea of a university historically, I mean, this is in John Henry Newman's St. John Henry Newman's great article. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's the idea of a university is what it's called, and this has been the traditional view of it is that a university isn't just for getting a degree and learning a lot about one subject. It's for the formation of a whole person. It's designed for continuing your formation throughout your whole life. And the idea that it's just, no, you take this class and then this class and then this class and then get this degree and then work this job is very much removed from what the university historically used to be. And so the left kind of understands that and being like, well, we want them to be, socially minded and get these ideas. They're just taking it in the complete wrong direction with it. And so I think
Mm.
if you really want to form well-rounded students, it's not that, universities, conservative colleges or whatever should just be like, yep, hands off. You just take this class and get this math degree and then do this course and blah, 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 blah. Because then that just makes, people who are completely neutral to any of these sort of very important topics that are in our lives. I don't know. You might completely disagree with me, but that's my thoughts.
I don't disagree with anything that you said, but I don't think that disagrees with Souls talking about.
Sure.
Souls talking about requirements that students have to have so many community service volunteer
Right.
hours as a requirement to graduate.
Hmm.
I don't think he would disagree with your explanation and advocacy for a more effective curriculum and required courses. I think he would certainly, and of course I can't speak for him. I would think he would certainly uh, appreciate everybody having to take a mandatory logic and ethics
Hmm.
class, separate classes, logic, study of ethics, econ 101. And that went in back in my youth, there was more of that. When I went to college, you'd have
Hmm.
certain requirements, which were a real drag because it delayed your graduation. Because if you're just going to have to take the classes in your major, you could be out in 2 years, really. But you had to have the general ed stuff, the math, the world history, and we still
Right.
have a little bit of that, but we don't have the philosophical
Hmm.
required courses like they used to. There were in part of it is that you by the time people got to college like 100 years ago, they already had read and studied all the great books. They had already um, they would
Right.
know Latin, they'd know Greek,
Yeah.
um, and they'd know world history, and so you have all that before you get in to college. So when he was going to college, probably what you were talking about, the 50s or 60s, I guess, 50s, the
Hmm.
early 60s. So I don't think he'd disagree with everything that you said. I think he'd agree with that 100%. But he's talking about something slightly different, which
Yeah.
is, well, now you have to go out and volunteer, force volunteerism.
Hmm.
And the way I was viewing his opinions is the same way that I don't know if you recall a certain parent objecting to the homeless encampment, a
Yes.
program
Yes. No, I remember that.
the local Catholic, two local Catholic schools, and the fit I pitched about both of them, um, and not least of which was because it was required, and then also because it was play acting as if you were a homeless person. There's a bunch of kids, and they're gonna have a good time. That's and homeless encampments are unique, and dangerous,
Hmm.
and not a fun place for any of them to be. Any of it. So there was a forced activity to try to get you to sympathize with a certain lifestyle, really.
Hmm.
And so I view that from that lens, and I think he's objecting to saying, well, now you gotta work these many hours in doing this or doing that.
Hmm.
And of course, as you alluded to, it's almost always going to be some sort of left wing cause.
Right.
It's not going to be, um, okay, let's spray down these sidewalks, so the homeless people can't ruin the businesses on Main Street. You know,
Yeah.
or let's take them give them lunch or something somewhere else so
Yeah.
that they aren't sleeping on in the storefronts, which would be a public service to both the homeless people and the business owners. But that would be frowned upon. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
let's
yeah,
frown upon taking them
you'd
apart.
never, yeah, you'd never require students to go volunteer to help clean up a church, something like
Yeah,
that. If it's not, explicitly, left wing, it will be just about as neutral as you can possibly make it. Like, let's go clean up the creek somewhere. Something that
right.
has a little bit of a good impact, but really doesn't mean too much in the long run.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, you volunteer, with the police department.
yeah,
Help out those guys. What?
hmm,
Or you think of other type of causes that they would never agree
yeah,
to. So
yeah.
I think that's
Yeah,
really what the point was.
yeah. No, no, no.
But
I agree with that point, but I think it just seemed a little bit too much to me. Like he was kind of in that mindset of no, it should just be discourse and nothing else. And I think that's just a problem with the attitude towards the university as a whole. Yeah, I think it's I think this is from Michael Knowles. I know I've told you I've listened to his show pretty frequently, and one of his points is that he makes pretty often is that a college education shouldn't just be about useful things, right? He says that's kind of been the Republican motto. You go to college to get a useful degree. No, part of college is learning useless things too that do not have like a practical monetary output, right? It's about the bigger sort of liberal education part of things, and of course he's using useful and useless in like the very utilitarian modern sense. He's like, well, actually, the most useless things can be the most useful, like the logic, the ethics classes. Those are useless on paper. They're not going to impact how well you can complete your accounting course and stuff like that. Well, they might, I guess, and logic and ethics bleeds into everything. But it's that sort of idea that's been missing for a very long time, is that it's not just about discourse, completing the requirements and getting the trade school type degree. It's more than that.
yeah, and I agree with all that. I think that's, but again, I think it's a little bit. different than what he was trying
Sure, sure, sure.
to say. But he had some decent quotes. Like the second one, the forced to volunteer article. I love this one. You can find a four-leaf clover faster than you can find a Republican in most sociology departments or English departments, which was so true. He's talking about how they, self-select and how
Hmm.
they're forcing their ideology into these institutions and dumbing down the curriculum for those kind of social sciences. I mean, he's just every article has a great line in it.
Hmm.
It's slightly off topic, but yeah, he has the same almost emotional reaction that I do on these forced volunteer. As he says, it's an oxymoron. You
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
force people to volunteer. If you do, then it's not volunteer.
yeah,
I guess he
exactly.
says forced community service, I guess. But
Hmm.
what community and how? And it's
Yeah,
always left wing,
yeah.
every single time.
Yeah. And then his next article was good too. The goodbye to Sarah and Benjamin is the title, and he tells the
Oh
story.
yeah,
His dear friends of his with their twins, Sarah and Benjamin, were just about to go to start in public education. So just him musing on will he ever meet Sarah and Benjamin again in the same way that they are now, tying into to all the narratives that are pushed in the public education system. And he points out specifically, a lot of the ideas of sex and gender that are present. And of course, he's writing this probably 25 years ago, and it's only gotten worse since then. But the point of like
yes,
the children sit in what is called a quote magic circle and talk about all sorts of personal things, with the rule being that they're not to repeat any of these things to anyone outside this magic circle. Sometimes they are explicitly told not to repeat what is said to their parents. Things like that, where it's like, you don't have to listen to your parents if you don't want to. It's all about you, very individualistic. You don't really have to respect these authority figures, listing off these examples of things like that. I'm just thinking about now, how much worse it's gotten. I don't know if you saw, I don't know if you follow Chris Rufo on Twitter, but he put out a whole bunch of stuff recently about a lot of those initiatives that the Department of Education was pushing, through these programs where it's like these things that he's describing, but on steroids, with all these crazy, DEI initiatives, with all the LGBT stuff that's just being pushed through all these programs with federal money,
yep.
that we're finally, seeing in the light of day, because it's, so much of this just is not publicized. It's just stuff that just happens, and people very rarely know about it unless the parents happen to hear from it from their child that they're sending to school. And then there's an investigation because it's just not made known to the parents beforehand, and usually not afterwards either.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was this article or if it was one of the other ones. He mentions how much wasted time there is in elementary school for the students, and well, in his point is, he says goodbye to Sarah and Benjamin question mark
Hmm.
because when you send them off to kindergarten, they may come back a year from now different people.
Yeah.
And it's not boarding school, but it's a significant portion of their life, and if these sweet you know, good little people can be manipulated, and that's really what's going on here. And the funny thing is when I talk to, I don't have a lot of friends, but I do have a number of people that I know. Certainly, of course, I get around in the community that are homeschooling their kids,
Hmm.
and they talk about how little time it takes to keep them at grade level. I mean, they're all their kids, except for the ones that may have some special needs or some learning problems they have to spend more time on. But like, say, a child of average intelligence and capacity, they're all several grade levels, as they're defined by the education establishment, ahead of where their grade is.
Yeah.
And that's so that they can get done with a day's curriculum in 3 hours or less. And
Hmm.
so then you're like, wait a second, why do we have these school days that are 7 hours? And I feel so bad for those kids that have to go into aftercare, but they got pre-care. Like with the parents that have to commute, these
Hmm.
kids are doing 12-hour shifts plus.
Yeah.
Going from the preschool before school program, school, and then after school programs, and then finally they're home and they have homework. They didn't
Yeah.
do it at one of the other. Oh my God! I mean, it's just brutal.
Yeah.
And then in the meantime, what are they spending all their day doing?
Yeah.
Oh, learn about the queer flag. Holy
Yeah.
smoke! You know,
Well, I know this is something, mom's talked about, being, a grade school teacher where, of course she's not teaching them all of these crazy things. And of course she was a very good teacher, but she's mentioned, so much of her time was taken up by just, classroom management. just like getting the kids to where they need to be and calming them down and stuff like that. And of course, that's just really mostly taken out of the equation if you're homeschooling them, 'cause it's your own kids and much easier to deal with them when it's not, 15, 20, 25 different hyperactive children, running around who have no interest in sitting down and reading quietly, in a given classroom at any given time. So I mean, it makes a lot of sense because I've seen that a lot too with people, moving towards homeschooling, and just
Uh,
to yeah, just generally, people who just want nothing to do with public schools. It's either homeschool or private Catholic school, at least in the circles that I associate with.
yeah. Well, and it's not so much, that you have a number of kids,
Right,
because if you have a number of good kids,
right, right.
normal, you're going to be able to, if you're a decent teacher, you'll be able to control them and keep their interest and move the curriculum along. It's when you have one or two kids that have been abused,
Hmm.
and uh, have terrible parents. And I remember as a young public defender, I was, I was absolutely from suburbia, and meaning that I had really no interaction with any sort of meaningfully dysfunctional families. I mean,
Hmm.
just none, zero personal interaction with them. And I remember, when I first started as an attorney, I get appointed to these juvenile offenders, these little kids. And I remember this one girl, and she was using terms. I'm like, okay, you have to. I don't know what you're saying. What word are you saying? And one of the words was crank. I'm like,
Mm,
okay, I don't know why you keep saying crank. Why are you saying the word crank? Well, crank is another term for speed or meth.
mm,
I didn't know that. And this little girl who's like 12 or 13 knew
yeah,
all these drugs. She was picked up in a drug house. I
yeah.
mean, she was not with her parents. And I would think, I was thinking, my God, how does this kid get so screwed up? And then I go out in the hallway to meet her parents because, I'm representing the kid. I
Hmm.
can meet the parents and find out, okay, how are we going to get this kid out of detention? And I meet the parents and it's like, oh, okay. Well, now
Yeah,
I understand. Of course.
yeah,
She knows what prank is. I got a meth head mother and the father who's in prison.
yeah.
And so you have one kid, and it's not the kid's fault, but you have one kid that has that kind of neglect and abuse problem. Guess what? Nobody else is getting educated in that classroom
Yeah,
until that kid can get civilized.
yeah,
They come in kindergarten and they're still pooping in their pants
yeah.
because they're not potty trained. I mean, your kindergarten teacher, that's something they have to deal with. So I have
Hmm.
a lot of respect for good kindergarten teachers, good elementary school teachers, because you have to struggle with all that stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's a right to education, and so then you have now the bureaucracy, and then you have the ADA is just terrible.
Hmm.
The statute that deals with disabled children in schools is just horrible. I mean, it just makes it so dysfunctional
Hmm.
because you have to mainstream it as much as you can possibly, and so you get a bunch of crazy kids,
Yeah.
and so you don't have the time or the energy for the normal, yeah, I said normal,
Hmm.
the normal kids and the gifted kids because you're
Yeah,
spending all this other time and everything else. So there is that other side of the coin where it's like, oh my God,
yeah.
the parents have so screwed up the kids, and that's a societal problem.
Hmm.
And so when you have, let's say you have a neighborhood that has, you know, 75% out of wedlock childbirths or higher.
Hmm.
Does anybody really expect that school to do well for any of those
Yeah.
kids?
No,
You
not at
get
all.
numbers like that.
Yeah.
You'd have to rule it with an iron fist.
Hmm.
It would have to be like a Garden of Eden. It'd have to be an oasis,
Hmm.
and an oasis. Did you see um, one of my favorite movies, Lawrence of Arabia?
I haven't, no.
Okay, well, a really disturbing and meaningful scene where he and a guy, I'm going to is a spoiler alert on this one scene. So they stop at like a well, like an oasis, but it's just like one well in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of this desert. And the prince who owns or controls that well approaches and shoots dead the tribesman that was with the main character
Wow.
who had drank out of the well because
Hmm.
his tribe was not allowed to drink out of that well. And you have to treat a school in a bad neighborhood like that guy protected the well.
Hmm.
I'm not saying kill everybody that's going to come on there, but it has to be your oasis for all those children, and anything else just won't work.
Yeah.
And 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 it takes a willpower to do that
Yeah.
we currently don't have.
Yeah.
You know, at some point, maybe somebody will appoint me dictator of a inner city school, and I can show how it's done.
Right. That's
If I can live through the school year.
yeah, good luck. But that
But I
I
think
mean
we
that
all know we all know what we need to do.
yeah.
We all know what we need. We need to have no drugs, no disciplinary issues tolerated, no violence, and high standards and
Hmm.
expectations. And if you meet those expectations, you get kicked out.
Yeah.
And oh, that's terrible for these kids not to be kicked out of school. Well, they weren't doing anything anyway.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
it's also
get
like,
them out.
how, yeah,
Save
how much better
the rest.
yeah, exactly. How much better it would be for the rest of the students if you remove that one student
Right.
who does not want to be there, will never want to be there, will never get anything out of this except for disrupting all of the other students' education.
Because you might as well just dedicate yourself to educating well
Hmm.
25% of the population rather than educating none of them well.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, why don't you cut your losses? Oh, those are children. Okay, well then you work on them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's what
Yeah.
school choice is all about.
Yeah. True. True. But that takes us to the last article we were talking about, and that's titled "Choosing a
Oh, I thought we were
College."
done. Oh,
No,
that
we
was
have one more.
one.
No, one more. Choosing a
No,
college.
oh,
Um,
you do that one too. Okay, I saw it.
yes,
Okay, go
yes,
ahead.
yes. And this one was about, he starts with a really, terrible story of seeing a young girl who had killed herself on the
Yeah,
campus of UCLA. And he mentions, there's averaged one suicide every year at UCLA when he was there, and similar statistics at these other, very, well-regarded universities and things like that. And he makes the point throughout that it's not just about, picking the courses that you want to take in college. This is the point that I really agree with him on, and I'm glad he talks about this. So it's so much more than just the courses you take. It's what sort of sort of ideological slant the university is going to have. What sort of opportunities are there for you? What sort of communities and stuff like that. And there's so many people who are sort of just coached into picking whatever sorts sort of at the top of the list and whatever they can get into, that they just don't realize how much more to college there is. And he says, one of the biggest problems is, a lot of those high school counselors are telling the parents, yeah, you'll be informed of the decision that your kid makes, and making it sort of, there has to be a big distinction between what the parent wants for the kid and what the kid wants for themselves. And it's like, well, the kid is 17, 16 when they're applying to colleges, 18. It's like, do they really know 100% what's going to be best for them in the long run? Of course, you don't want to make every single decision for your kid at all times. But his point is, it's just like, there's so many other things to consider that people don't often consider when they choose a college, and that makes them hate it, be miserable, completely socially isolated at times, fall into drug use, all of these other things that happen frequently throughout college campuses.
yeah, and it's so sad. Uh, when he does mention, I don't know if I pulled the quote. Um, yeah, here it is. Late adolescence and early adulthood are among the most dangerous times in people's lives when one foolish decision can destroy everything from which parents and children have invested time and efforts and hopes for years. That's such a poignant statement, and I think it's so true. And I think a lot of I don't know. It's just such a tough subject. Having problems in high school, emotional problems in high school, and then they go off to college. Um, it's a hard transition for anybody. It's a little scary. Going out, first time and living somewhere else. And so his point is correct. It's important to choose not just what is quote unquote the best college available to that student. It's got to be the best college for that particular student
Hmm.
so that they can be successful and they can be reasonably happy, and
Right.
and have the right people around them.
Hmm.
That's my biggest concern. As you know, like when we go on college visits, I learned this from Sam. You pay attention to the bulletin boards.
Mm.
And you look at the bulletin boards, especially the student union or student center. Um, and this is good advice to any parents who are going on these tours. Look, find out, just look at them and see how many weirdo queer clubs are advertising. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not talking about gay rights. That's fine. If you have a gay, because sometimes it'll just really innocuous. It'll just be like, oh, it's Gay Pride Month in June or whatever, and we're going to have free ice cream and candy or something.
Sure.
And in rainbow t-shirts. Okay, fine. That's no problem. But if it's Marxist, socialist, you see a hammer and sickle, and you see drag shows. You see these kind of things that are hostile to Christianity. Sometimes they'll be overtly anti-God and anti-Christianity advertisements at these universities. You could see a culture. Like, well,
Yeah.
remember we toured. It was in Cincinnati. Was it Xavier? No, what
Yeah.
was it?
Xavier University. Yeah.
Xavier. And they had a bunch of crucifixes out on the lawn, and it was for people killed by police. I think
I think so.
wasn't it
Yeah.
the college?
Yeah.
And then when we're at the tour, this is a college university. We're going on the tour, and there's a chapel, a church right in the middle of the camp, literally in
Hmm.
the center of the campus. And I asked the guy, like, well, can we go in? Of course, it was like during COVID
Hmm.
craziness time. And she's like, "Oh yeah, well you can, I guess." It's like, and it turned out I think she sung in the choir.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I remember correctly, I'm like, and your application, you go into a Catholic high school. It was just astounding to me
Yeah.
that they would not include the church on a standard college tour of a Catholic college,
Yeah.
but they were like embarrassed by it.
Well, I
It was
remember
weird.
that being, one of the factors for me going to Truman, not just for the finances and stuff, which worked out great with Truman. But I think on our tour, that was the one campus that we visited that had an advertisement for a pro-life event for the Students for Life Club
Yes,
that was prominent.
correct.
Now, I don't think that was a testament to the broader student population. I think it was a testament to the very strong sort of subculture of sort of the conservative organizations at Truman, because Truman did have a very prominent communist club and their drag shows and stuff like that, and other ridiculous initiatives. But looking back, I am glad that I went to Truman and met the people that I did, and had the opportunities that I did have there. I think a lot of it was because we happened to see a pro-life poster being advertised, and that there was a strong enough few groups like that were on campus.
Well, and I wasn't looking for complete one-sided.
Right, right.
If you're allowed to have a pro-life advertisement for a pro-life event on a public bulletin board, that's a sign of a higher quality community than what you have on a lot of campuses where they just rip it down. They wouldn't
Hmm.
allow those things to stay up there. So, and it's okay to be. It's almost better as a college student to be part of a subculture. It's
Yeah,
cooler to, be the dominant culture because you're the avant-garde. We're dangerous, or
right,
we're
right.
thinking for ourselves. We're not that mob of midwits or whatever.
Hmm.
And so as long as there's a culture, and it's not, you're just not out on your own
Right.
in like some foreign land with some weirdos. That's the key,
Hmm.
I think. And then everything else, you have to have a decent program and finances and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's that. I don't know if we don't have any listeners, but if there's a listener that has a kid that's going to go to college, that's a key to successfully choosing the right college.
Right. Right.
I'm figuring at some point I'm going to do something infamous or famous, and then people will come back and study
Mm.
uh, these podcasts
Maybe it'll be
to.
me. Maybe it won't be you.
Well, I'm hoping it won't be you, because these podcasts will probably ruin your whatever it is that you, because you will do something famous.
Mm.
So I'm hoping that no one tracks these down to embarrass you by the ravings of your father, and you can just
Hmm.
say, "Well, I was just humoring him." My dad. I just nice to have a call once a week. I don't know. I think he's a nut. I give you full permission to throw me under the bus as long as it benefits you.
I think it'll be hard to make
But
that argument as
so,
we're
so
moving into season 11 after this one, and I've been an active participant in this
well,
for
well,
4 years,
well, like I
4 years, five
yeah,
years.
but usually more than that was your senior in high school, I think,
I think, yeah,
right? So, yeah,
5.
it's
It'll be coming up on
5.
5 in November.
Well, yeah, but you can. I mean, most of what you say, you're well reasoned and you're deliberate.
Mm.
I'm a little shoot from the hip, and I say
Sure.
things that are a little incendiary.
Uh-huh.
Don't you think? I think,
I'd say so.
and you're not agreeing with everything I say. You're just like, oh, okay, and then you go on to something else. So
I guess that's true.
it's important to protect
Yes.
your future.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you don't say anything bad about anybody. I say some, critical things about people. So
Sure.
but
Sure.
my opinions are my own.
Hmm.
Put that in the disclaimer.
There we go. All right. Do you have any other final thoughts for this episode?
No.
All right. Well, this has been season 10, episode 14 of Unlimited Opinions. I've been Adam Bishop.
Still work.